In May of 1945, the war in Europe was over, but the war in the Pacific was still a bloodbath, one that was projected to be even worse with the invasion of Japan. If your father or your grandfather was slated to make that invasion, a campaign that was projected to last from 2 to 4 more years and approximately 1 million casualties, you may not be here today. These crosses, which were produced by the United States government, 750,000 of them, were never used thanks to the brave men of the USS Indianapolis. They delivered the components of the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. The other atomic bomb dropped on Nagasaki ended the war and prevented those 1 million casualties and allowed the fostering of many generations that may not have happened after the war. Today, we are honored to have Mr. Maurice Bell. Mr. Bell is a survivor of the sinking of the USS Indianapolis. Mr. Bell, it is an honor to have you with us here today.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be here.
I would like to start with, how did you get into the Navy?
Well, when I turned 18, I had to go to the draft board. And I had so many days to register. And just about 2 or 3 months later, I got a notice from the draft board that said, come. So I went to Camp Shelby here in Mississippi. And they told us anyone that passed the Army physical could go into the Navy or Army, either one we wanted. Well, there was a group of us guys together, and we all decided the Navy because we didn't want to sleep in a mud hole.
I don't blame you.
So I went in the Navy and went to Great Lakes, Illinois, and boot camp.
And what did you train to do in the Navy? What was your military skill that you were training?
Well, after I went aboard ship.
You went aboard ship first?
Before, yes. I took my boot camp at Great Lakes and then went right overseas and went to Pearl Harbor. And I stayed in Pearl Harbor a couple of days, and they assigned me to the USS Indianapolis heavy cruiser. And they put me in the 7th Division, which had charge of the 20-millimeter anti-aircraft guns and all the lookout watch. So that's what they trained me to do while I was on there.
Well, how long were you on the Indianapolis?
I stayed on it right at 2 years before it went down.
Now, the ship was in commission in the 30s.
It was commissioned in, I believe it was 32. President Roosevelt used it as his flagship to travel around the world back when he first went into office.
Yeah, ironically, it was called the Lucky Indianapolis.
Yes, that's right, until it sunk.
Until it sank. Now, the Indianapolis, you were making a lot of campaigns in the Pacific on that ship, were you not?
Yes. We was in an invasion of quite a few of those islands out there. I can call the names of a lot of them, but not in rotation is the way we took them.
And your job was naval gunfire support? Is that what y'all were providing
Right.
for the invasion?
Right. Mm-hmm. We was anti-aircraft guns that we had. Of course, the ship had 40 millimeters and 5-inch guns and larger guns.
8-inch guns.
8-inch. Couldn't remember. Been so many years, you know. And we shot down quite a few planes. I forget exactly now during the war. And we almost got hit another time by a kamikaze, but the gun shooting at him turned him, and he crashed a little ways from us.
But you did get hit by a kamikaze in March
Yes.
of 1945.
That's right. We was bombarding Okinawa. And every morning there, we would go into general quarters because the kamikazes would come in and try to sink anything they could, do as much damage as possible. Well, they would always try to come in out of the sun, so we would have to be looking right in the sun to see them. And we would go to general quarters, and then when everything was clear, would secure. Well, this particular morning, we went in general quarters, sitting there, and nothing showed up. After a while, the sun had been up for a while. We cleared from general quarters. I was sitting up on the starboard side of the bridge, and I couldn't leave my station until my relief got there. And he had the duty, it's supposed to have been from 8 a.m. to 12 noon. So he went down and have breakfast before he come up to relieve me, which I didn't mind because I knew he'd get a little hungry before noon. And so I was sitting there on my lookout station, and I looked up to my right. There was a cloud up there. And just as I looked up to my right, the plane come out of the cloud. And the pilot spotted us instantly because when he come out, he just turned right into a dive coming down. And one man back aft in the area called the bathtub opened fire on him. And I could see the tracers. I think it was 1 out of every 8 bullets, I'm not sure. Anyway, I could see those tracers going and hitting the plane. And that plane was coming just as straight down to the bridge where I was sitting as an arrow. And all at once, when those bullets hitting it, he come down, it turned him to the left just a little bit. I saw it as it turned to the left, just barely little. Come on down and missed where I was at and hit the radar right above this man's head. It was shooting at him, but didn't hurt him. And he crashed on this port side, just forward of the port screws. And of course, it knocked them out. And knocked out all the water purification stations. And it took us about 3 months to get it repaired good enough to get back to the States for dry dock. And we pulled into a little harbor there, and I can't remember the name of it, but and dropped anchor out there. And the Japanese were still on these little islands all the way circle us. And at night, they would strip off, put black grease or something on them so they wouldn't reflect in the moonlight, swim out to different ships. It was anchored, there was a bunch of them anchored out there that had been damaged. And they would try to get aboard if they could. If they couldn't, they'd get up close against the ship somewhere, blow themselves up. So all this people over there blowing themselves up now is not new to me.
No, sir.
And we let our motor whaleboat down at night. Coxswain, radioman, and a Marine. We had 39 Marines aboard ship with his machine guns would be circling the ship all night. And they had orders to fire at anything they see moving in the water. And they done a good job on watching too. And they was wanting to fire their guns so bad they'd see anything out there, boy, they'd fire at it. And they'd go around real fast and check to find out what it was. Call back and tell them cardboard box or something. And I know that the Marines on the bow of the ship is walking back and forth, wanted to fire their guns, and I told them, I'll fix you up. So I sneaked down, I got a cardboard box about so big, come up and laid down on the bow, right on the point of the ship. When the boat went around going down the port side, I throwed that box over, and it floated on out, got out there, well, they both opened up on it. Captain McVeigh hollered and wanted to know what they're shooting at. One of them said, don't know, sir, we see something. Called down to the boat to come around and investigate, and he called back a little bit and said, cardboard box. Captain come down there and patted them on the back and shook their hands and congratulated them for being on the ball. If he'd have known what really happened, there'd have been 2 Marines and 1 sailor in the brig.
And you might have been one of them.
I would have been that sailor. Probably on bread and water.
Yeah. Now the bomb that was on the kamikaze actually went through the ship.
It when it hit the deck, he must have just released it just a fraction before it hit the deck. It was a penetrating bomb. I don't know what size, but it went through the steel deck right below was number 3 mess hall, and in that corner where it went through, there was 4 or 5 men sitting there at the table eating breakfast. And the bomb went through that table. It killed them men and went all the way through the ship, and just as it got in the water, it exploded back up through and wounded 29, I believe it was. 9 killed and 29 wounded at that time.
And it was because of that damage that the Indianapolis went back to the West Coast for repairs.
Right, that's right. We pulled into that little harbor that I was talking about a minute ago, and they brought a flat barge alongside loaded with sheets of steel and underwater welding equipment, which I didn't know at that time they could weld underwater. But they welded these sheets of steel on the side, that hole, and then they went inside, because we had that area blocked off for watertight doors. Well, after they got the sheets of steel welded over that hole, well, they opened it up and poured concrete in there. Where they got the concrete from, I have no idea. But then they sealed that all back watertight again, and we got underway. And ever so often we would have to meet water tenders, take on fresh water, because they couldn't use salt water to operate the machinery and stuff.
Yeah, you can't make steam with salt water.
That's right.
You finally got her back to the West Coast.
Yeah, we finally got back to Mare Island, California, which is right across the bay from Vallejo, and they gave us, I think it was 20 or 21 day leave. I got the first leave, went home. My folks was living in Chicago at the time, so then my wife went back to California with me, stayed there till the ship sailed again.
Well, with that, Mr. Bell, we're going to have to take a short break.
Okay.
Don't go away. We'll be back with more local heroes and Mr. Maurice Bell, survivor of the sinking of the USS Indianapolis. Welcome back to Local Heroes here on WKFK TV7, coming to you from the GI Museum. We are honored and privileged to be talking to Mr. Maurice Bell. He is a survivor of the sinking of the USS Indianapolis. Mr. Bell, we left off where you had gone home on leave after the ship had gone back to California for repairs, and you were there about 20 days.
Yeah, I had about 21 day leave. I can't remember, been so many years back, you know. But when I went back, my wife went with me and stayed out there until the ship sailed again. And we stayed on the island in a Quonset hut. The Navy furnished these huts rented them to us for $1 a day.
Boy, they gave you the best
And
accommodations, didn't they? Quonset huts.
One of my best buddies and his wife rented one, and of course it had 3 bedrooms, kitchen and everything. And so my wife and I moved in, took 1 bedroom and all. That way it cost us 50 cents a day.
50 cents
for rent. They furnished everything but your eats. And they had these trolley things out running by every few minutes. You just wanted to go to somewhere on the island, or you just walk out there and hang on the side of one of them. And that didn't cost you anything. And we got to where we would hardly leave the island to go over to Vallejo, because we could go to a movie for a dime. We could go bowling, 10 cents a line. Yedunk, ice cream.
Yeah, that's what they call it in the Navy.
Was, I think, a nickel. So we would usually go out that way and spend about 50 or 60 cents. If we crossed the bay, before we could walk a half a block, we'd have spent $10. So it was so much cheaper to go over there. Well, we stayed there until the ship got out of dry dock, and our latest orders was to proceed to Hunter's Point, which is across the bay from San Francisco, pick up cargo for delivery. When we got over there and tied up to the pier, well, they picked certain men on there to load this cargo ship, and I always got picked for a working party. But I'm glad I got that one now, because that one turned out to be loading the 2 atomic bombs, components of the bombs that was dropped in Japan to end the World War II. And they had the uranium and other trigger, and all that stuff in lead containers. They took them up in officers' quarters, and they'd built special racks up there, just barely to fit them. And they'd slide these things down in there, and then they'd put a bar across it with special locks, and some Marine or somebody would stand there guard. But I helped load the large crate, the one that we had to set it on the quarter deck with a crane. And then we would take pipe, about a 2-inch pipe, I guess it was, and roll it on the deck, When one would roll out here, we'd grab it, take it to the front, put it under until we got it inside of the port hangar. And we got this piped out from under it and fastened it down to the steel deck. And as soon as we got it all completely secured, we had to back off. Marine guard stepped up there with his machine gun. Now, we could walk through the hangar anytime we wanted to, but we wasn't supposed to stop and talk to the Marine guard or get up. Oh, we'd walk, I guess, about maybe 40 minutes that wall over there from this box. Of course, we didn't know what it was, and rumors started on there as to what we was delivering. But we got underway, and they told us that sooner we could get to our destination and unload it, that'd shorten the war that much. That's all we knew. And we made a record speed run, went to Pearl Harbor, stopped for just a very few short hours, got underway again, record speed from there to Tinian, where the Enola Gay was waiting. And that record run averaged 28 knots, and our top speed was about 32. And that record speed run still holds to this day for a heavy cruiser.
You made it about 10 days.
Yep.
And what were some of the rumors that were going around of what you were carrying?
Well, there was quite a few rumors but I can't remember most of them. But the one main one that I can remember, we was carrying scented toilet paper to General MacArthur.
Scented toilet paper under Marine guard with a machine gun. I don't guess MacArthur wanted any of that to disappear. You Navy troops were after that, huh?
That was right.
So you get to the island of Tinian and you unload this. You still did not know that you were carrying components of an atomic bomb, did you?
No, we did not know. We got to Tinian, we pulled up in the harbor and dropped anchor. Most everybody thinks we pulled up to a pier and unloaded it, but we didn't. We pulled up in the middle of the harbor, dropped anchor, and they pushed some flat barges out there. And they was loaded with officers, Army, Navy, Marines. Never seen so many of them. And we set that crate off on that barge, and they brought the other stuff, and then they pushed it on away to the pier where the trucks was waiting on it. They had the trucks backed up on the piers, and well, when these officers left the ship, we got underway just very shortly and headed to Guam. Okinawa, let's see, Guam or Okinawa.
It was Guam, yes,
I get
sir.
mixed up on it.
It was Guam, yes, sir.
And we stayed there a couple nights or so, and Captain McVeigh sent one of the officers over to check on an order he had placed back sometime back. He had ordered 500 new life jackets, because our life jackets was getting old and ragged, and they hadn't delivered them. So he sent an officer over there to check on them. Right away, here come the order, plus a duplicate order, 1,000 of them. They unloaded them. They had a big pile of them up there in the bathtub. And each one of us was supposed to have our life jacket on all times from underway. I didn't even know where mine was at, much less be wearing it at the time. And they gave us orders to proceed to the Philippine Islands, pick up Admiral Raymond Spruance, because he was the flagship of the Fifth Fleet, and our ship was the flagship. And so we was going to pick him up and then test their guns, join the Fifth Fleet, test their guns and everything.
You were going to get ready for the invasion of Japan.
Right. And they had already set the date for the invasion of Japan, which I didn't know at the time. And that's what we was getting ready for. And so just before we got underway, Captain asked for an escort. They said, we don't have any, and you don't need one anyway.
That would be a destroyer escort.
Yeah. So they told us just get underway and go. So we did. I don't remember which day of the week, but anyway, on Sunday, we took it easy that day. Most of us went to church service that morning. And then that night, I happened to have all night off that night to sleep.
You're underway at this time,
Yes.
this point, yes, sir.
Uh-huh. And they did not tell us that a certain area out there, they knew there were submarines out there, because there's another ship that had been sunk just a few days before right there. And they didn't tell us about that. So first thing we knew about a submarine was on Sunday night, right about midnight. And when Captain Hashimoto shot 3 or 4 torpedoes at us, got 2 direct hits. There's about 60 feet or so of the bow blown completely off. We was doing 32 knots. And the second one hit just a second or so later, further back into the ammunition supply depot. and the ammunition started blowing up. And with the bow completely blown off, doing 16 knots, the engines never shut down, plowing right into the water and just crushing one bulkhead right after another, filling it up with water. That's the reason it turned over and sunk so fast. Less than 15 minutes.
Now let's set the stage for this. So it's 14 minutes past midnight.
Yeah.
You're down in your bunk. You asleep at the time?
I was till the first torpedo hit, and then I was awake immediately.
I bet you were. And then you came out of your bunk.
Yeah, I came out of my bunk, got up off the deck, and I put my pants and shirt on, and my shoes and socks, but I didn't tie my shoes, grabbed my hat, and started looking for my life jacket. I had to go up to the bathtub where there was some of those new ones. I got one of them. When I got up there was 3 left. As I reached down for one of them, somebody grabbed it, and I got the next one. There was 1 left. And I went down to the port side, the very spot where that kamikaze plane crashed on it. And I remember running up and grabbing the lifeline with both hands. The next thing I can remember, because there's a blank, mental blank in there, I was standing up straight on the port screw shaft just forward of the screw. And I looked back to my left, just a few feet back there. There it was, still turning, sticking up about 30 feet up in the air. And going over the lifeline and around the ship as it rolled on over. I don't remember. I guess it's a good thing I can't remember it. And I jumped from there.
Well, Mr. Bell, we're going to have to end this program, but we're going to get you back for the next one. So I know you're not going to want to miss the end of this story. So join us again for the next Local Heroes, where we'll be talking more with Mr. Maurice Bell, survivor of the sinking of the USS Indianapolis. Don't miss that one. Welcome to Local Heroes on WKFK TV 7. Last week we talked with Mr. Maurice Bell, and we're going to talk to him again today. But had it not been for those brave men on board the USS Indianapolis who delivered the components for the atomic bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, thereby preventing what the government estimated would be 750,000 casualties, 1 million men total. And the government produced these crosses, 750,000 of them, in anticipation of the 750 deaths that may happen in the 2 to 4 year invasion of the islands of Japan. The USS Indianapolis delivering those components allowed that war to end earlier and not subtract those generations from our nation, those great generations, had those million men been lost in the invasion. Welcome back to the show, Mr. Maurice Bell, USS Indianapolis. Now, Mr. Bell, in our last show, the torpedoes had hit the Indianapolis. You were in your bunk. Basically, you were very surprised, of course, that you heard an explosion. You told me earlier you thought maybe a boiler had blown up.
Right.
You get out of your bunk, and all of a sudden there's another one that's like, uh-oh, maybe that's not a boiler blowing up. You get your clothes on after you get up off the deck, and then you make your way out of the after portion of the ship, which is where your bunk was.
Right.
Was it difficult for you to get out of the after?
No, it wasn't. If I'd have been just a minute or so later, I probably wouldn't have made it out. But when I went out, it was very easy to get on up and shortly after I got out, they sealed off those compartments back there with men still in it. And I was just lucky to get out just a short time before they actually sealed them off.
And in the last show, you talked about getting up to the bathtub on the Indianapolis where there were 3 life jackets, 3 of the brand new life jackets. One man got one life jacket right out of your hand, and you got the second to the last one.
That's right.
And you went down a lifeline, and you were standing on the
Port
side shaft, something that sticks out of this hole where the shaft goes.
Yeah.
And you actually turned around and saw that the shaft was still turning.
Yeah, the screw was still turning slow, and I jumped from there, and I estimated I was about 30 feet up in the air when I jumped. And my main concern right then was that someone or some debris or something would fall on me, but I'm very fortunate it didn't. Another man hit the water just as I popped back up. He hit the water just about 3 feet from me, and he was in the shower. He had just gotten off watch, and he was taking a shower, and he come out of the shower and right on over the side with no life jacket or anything on. And after the ship was completely gone, then he hung on to me for a pretty good while till we finally found some floating debris. And we found a net, a cork net that was floating. It was all wadded up, and he got on it, and he was one of the survivors, and his name was McVeigh, same name as our captain, Captain Charles Butler McVeigh III, and he was from Indiana. And I know after we got picked up years later, I've jumped just a fraction here. Next time I saw him was at our first survivors reunion 15 years after that happened. Because I had no idea where he was from, and I'd passed by his house many times in Lafayette, Indiana. He asked me if I got a medal for saving his life. I told him, no, was I supposed to? He said, well, I filled out all the papers and everything for it. I'm still waiting to hear from him on that.
Okay.
And
when you got in the water, was there a lot of diesel fuel, fuel oil?
the water was totally covered with the black fuel oil because the fuel tanks had erupted when the explosions. And of course, I hit right in all that water, and I was in the water right up to my shoulders up here. And every breath would be pure fumes from that oil. Oh, you talk about sick. I've never been so sick in my life. All the other guys were the same way. And we'd start heaving. Well, just a little bit, nothing had come up. Well, your supper that you'd eaten the night before, it came on up. And there was nothing there to come up. And we'd heave, and finally we would quit. And you never knew, but just a little bit you'd start in again. And what I would do is take my knees, my arms around both knees, and pull them up into my chest just as hard as I could, and just roll in the water. And that's the only way I could make it. It was hurt so bad with nothing in your stomach, to come up. And we do that till it finally quit. We started gathering up debris, anything we could find floating in the water, and tie it together. And the group I was with, we couldn't see or hear anyone else. So we thought we was the only ones out there. There was turned out 2 large groups, and we was one of the larger groups. Started out probably 150 in the group. And we found 2 or 3 of those little donut life rafts. We tied them together, and we had some men that was wounded very bad. One man had his back broke. Some had the leg or arm or different things. Big cuts on them. And we put them in the life rafts. If we hadn't, none of them would have made it. The rest of us had to stay in the water. And just after daylight, somebody hollered, "Sharks!" Looked there, and sure enough, there was sharks all around us, big ones. And when they'd get up real close to us, we'd start splashing and hollering and kicking and making as much noise as we could, trying to scare them away. But we was told later on that was the wrong thing to do. Said that attracts the sharks more than it will scare them away. But we didn't know. And every morning, I stayed in the water 4 days and 5 nights, now with nothing to eat or drink. And that little group I was with kept shrinking. Every morning we would check them out to see how many was dead. There'd be several of them. We'd take their life jackets off, take anything out of their pockets they had, and had a little old bag on one of those life rafts, and whatever they had in their pocket, we'd put in that to save it to turn into their family. Their dog tags, all that. And then just take the life jackets and just turn them loose and let them go. Their head would go under about so far, and they'd float on off. They wouldn't float very far till you hear a splash. If you look in time, you see a shark and got them. But them sharks would come at you. Sometimes you wouldn't see one. All of a sudden, they would attack the group. They might come up from underneath you and just come up like an elevator going up. Grab somebody by the leg, and you might hear them just turn, look just in time to see them go straight down. Never see them again. But if you watch that spot for a few minutes, you watch the water turning red where they done tore him all to pieces. So you never knew whether you was next or not. And several times some of the guys would float off from the group a little bit, maybe float out there about 40, 50 feet. And hear them give a yell, and you look, maybe see them go down, never see them. But there was 1 or 2 times I swam out to them and brought them back in before the shark killed them. All at once somebody saw an island right there close by. He started describing that island to us. And I got to looking for it because I wanted to see it, because they said it was a beautiful tropical island, palm trees. There was a bunch of beautiful native girls on that island out there on the beach, and they had a basket of fruit on top of their head. They had their grass skirts on, dancing and singing. Come on, I'll give you some of this fruit. Well, those guys that could see them so plain finally took their life jackets off because they were so close to it and started swimming to the island, and we have never seen or heard from any of them since. So I'm glad now I didn't see them. I almost saw them a time or two.
Now they were hallucinating from
Yep.
exposure.
Yep. And
what were the nights like? The days were probably hot.
the days the sun was hot and it almost blinded you, but that fuel oil that was all over you kept the sun from burning you. So it helped. And at night, it got cold out there. And after midnight sometime, it gets cold enough, your teeth start chattering. And that would keep up until the sun come up. Was always glad to see the sun, was always glad to see it go down. And I know a few years ago, I signed up with a VA and for disability, and for that cold nights and all, it affected me certain ways, and I got some disability, but not all. I'd love to have gotten it all, but I didn't.
Well, we're going to have to take a short break right here, Mr. Bell, and we'll be right back. So don't go away. I know you want to hear the rest of this story. Welcome back to Local Heroes here on WKFK TV 7. We have the honor and the privilege of talking to Mr. Maurice Bell, survivor of the sinking of the USS Indianapolis. Mr. Bell, before we went to the last break, you were talking about being in the water and how cold the nights were and how hot the days were. And a lot of the guys resorted to drinking salt water because they were so thirsty. But you somehow resisted that temptation.
I knew that salt was too salty, and it would kill you if you drank it without drinking fresh water. I'd been told that 1 cup of that salt water, you'd have to drink so many cups of fresh water to counteract it. I can't remember how many now, but so I just made up my mind I was not going to drink any of it if I could help it.
And you just washed your mouth out with it occasionally?
Rinse my mouth out, and my mouth would get real dry, and I'd rinse it out with that and spit it out.
And the sharks were attacking.
You never knew from one moment to the next when the shark was going to actually attack. Sometimes it'd just be a few minutes between an attack, or sometimes it might be a couple hours. You just didn't know. But you knew they was there all the time, swimming big circle around you. And that circle would get smaller and smaller, so all of a sudden they'd dive in on, grab somebody.
And the number of men was dwindling as the days and hours went by. And did any of the sharks get close to you while you were in the water?
Well, there was some of them swimming just a few feet from me and passed me by, but none ever touched me. I was very fortunate there.
Now, some of the guys were giving up hope of being rescued, but you didn't.
No, I did not give up. I knew in my mind that we was going to be rescued, but I didn't know when or how, or just hoping they'd get there sooner.
But you had all the confidence that you were going to be rescued. You never
Yes.
gave up hope. There were a lot of aircraft that flew over, but they were very high.
Yes.
And did y'all see the aircraft?
We could see the airplanes up there, but they looked like they wasn't but about 12 inches long. They're so high.
So the airplane would go by, nothing would happen.
That's right. But I'll tell you, that was a sad scene to watch one come over and then watch him disappear. And I think there was just 2 or 3 practically every day. And then Lieutenant Wilbur Gwynn flew over, and he was much lower, and he said his ambition was to sink an enemy submarine, and He was stationed on an island that we had taken over from the Japanese just months before. And he would fly out every day and searching anything he could find. And he was also testing a trailing antenna. This antenna was a cable they would let out. I don't know how long it was, but on the end of it was a big steel ball, so it would help hold it out straight. And they was having trouble with it, and it would get out there and start flopping around and beating against the side of the plane. So that morning they went out. He said they'd go about 100 miles out from that island. They went out about 100 miles, and they let that antenna out. And sure enough, it was flopping and beating against the plane. They cut it, let it drop, went back in, landed. Said him and his crew had lunch and rested a while the crew on the ground there refueled the plane, got it ready to go again, put another antenna on it. They went out, and he said, "I done something I'd never done before, and why I don't know." He said, "I told my co-pilots, let's go about 200 miles before we let it out." He said, "We'd never done that before." So we did. Got out there and they let it out, and it fouled up. They was trying to cut it loose for it knocked a hole in the side of the plane. And he went back there and said he turned the controls over to the co-pilot, went back there and watched a little bit and said, he said, "Let me try cutting that." And he took them bolt cutters or whatever, reaching out there and trying to catch that cable to cut it. He said he would never look down. That's just something he wouldn't do. But when he got twisted around there trying to cut it, it throwed him around this way where his head was turned down. Couldn't help from looking down. He said he saw a black object in the water. Said it was about the same size of a submarine and just barely under the water. And he knew he had a submarine to sink. He took over the controls and ordered his torpedoes ready to fire. And he come down in his dive, and he said just as he started to level off, ready to drop torpedoes, he saw arms waving. And that was us in that group. We was waving and hollering at him. We was waving and hollering at him just like he could hear us. But we didn't care. We was so glad he was, and he dropped on it. I saw the torpedo doors was open, but I didn't know what he was up to. I thought he had opened the torpedo doors so they could be up there looking down and see us better. I didn't know they'd opened them to drop torpedoes on us. And anyway, they secured the torpedoes, and he flew on down, and he done his wings like that, let us know that he spotted us. And he sent a message in to his commanding officer. Everything was in code. So that message got all garbled up. They couldn't make heads or tails out of it. So he flew around there a little bit, sent another one, and was talking to some other pilots of other planes that was in the vicinity. They started coming that way. And another plane got out there, Adrian Marks, lieutenant from Indiana, and he flew around a little bit. They talked back and forth. They said they had no idea whether they was looking at enemy or friendly. They see one or two here and a dozen there, and just scattered over about 40 square miles. And so they said these small groups, the sharks was attacking them so much worse than it was the large groups. So he voted, his entire crew voted to land in a seaplane.
He's in a PBY.
Yeah, I think so. And they landed, and the waves was running about 10 feet. He said he'd come down, he'd hit top one wave and up, just bouncing like that until they finally settled down. and done so much damage to his plane, he said he knew it would never fly again. So the other planes overhead was talking to him, and as he started taxiing around to pick up somebody, they would direct him so they wouldn't run over him. And he picked up 56 men out of the water.
He was lashing them to the wings, wasn't he?
Yeah, they filled the inside of the plane, give them a little water to drink. They took them out on the wings, and they took a life jacket and ripped it up in strips and tied them on the wings so they wouldn't slide off. And then they put them on the pontoons till it was full. And then they had to ride it out till the ships got there about midnight that night. Started picking them up. Well, I saw him as he come down to land, and I never saw him again. It's so far away, several miles from where I was at. And, of course, we didn't know what was going on over there. And then one plane dropped a message to us and said, hang on, ships will be there about midnight. That was in the afternoon. So that night, I don't know what time it was, but anyway, we saw the lights from the ships. It's supposed to be blackout, but they turned lights on anyway. That saved a lot of lives. That night, we could see a spotlight. Went up there and just going around and around. Well, that particular ship had 2 spotlights on it. And he put one on the bow and had it going back and forth because he's afraid he'd run over somebody because of what he was hearing. And that light, we could tell it was getting closer and closer. But you know, that light, that night saved many lives because it gave us great hope knowing that we was going to be rescued. And but the great light, the real great light is Jesus Christ himself. And he's still in the business of saving lives. So when they got out there, of course that ship dropped anchor too, way on out on the horizon where we was at. And we kept watching. They put the boats out, and they was going back and forth with spotlights on them, picking up everybody they could. We kept watching that, and we about decided they was going to bypass the group I was in. So just before daylight, a man in my group said, I'm going to shine this light again. It had a little 1-cell flashlight that when you turn it on, it flashed SOS. So he held it up, turned it that way, and turned it on. And I was watching real close. I wasn't a few feet from him. I didn't see a flash. But boy, one of those boats over there turned, they come to us just wide open. When he got over there, he said, I thought I saw a flash over here. I come to investigate. So he called back and got some more boats over there. And they started picking us up and taking us to the ship. They took me to the USS Bassett. And it was getting daylight by the time they got over there and started picking us up. Got me back to the Bassett. Well, we got aboard. They took scissors and cut my clothes off and gave me a cup of cold water and half an orange. Told me to suck the juice out of that. And put me in a bunk. One of the men, all the men on that just gave their bunks up for us. And I went to sleep. When I woke up, we was underway. I could feel the ship rocking. And one man took me to the head and started scrubbing me, trying to get that oil off of me. Well, he got most of it, but not all of it. And it was 2 or 3 weeks or longer after that. Every morning I'd wake up, there'd be big black spots of oil on my pillow where it run out of my ears. Mm. And but he took me then to the mess hall and set me down at the table. I couldn't stand up, much less walk. Set me down at the table and brought me a tray of food. You'd never guess what they brought.
No.
Fried fish.
Oh, no.
The cat, of course, I ate 2 bites of whatever or something off the tray, and it made me sick. I couldn't eat anymore. They learned in a hurry that they had to feed us baby food and fluids.
We're going to have to end this show, but we're going to get you back again because we've got to hear the rest of the story. So please join us for the next Local Heroes, where we're going to be talking more with Mr. Maurice Bell, survivor of the sinking of the USS Indianapolis. Welcome to Local Heroes here on WKFK TV 7. This is the 3rd show in our series with Mr. Maurice Bell. Maurice Bell is a survivor of the sinking of the USS Indianapolis. Welcome back to Local Heroes, Mr. Bell. Now, on our 2nd show, we left off when you got your first meal on board the ship after your rescue, and it was fried fish. Obviously, you didn't want to eat much of that, if any of it, and they had to give you some sort of special diet because you couldn't eat much, could you?
That's right. I didn't eat any of that fried fish, but the only thing we could eat and hold down would be liquid stuff and baby food, I call it.
Baby food.
Yeah, which was mighty good at that time.
Yes, it was. And you described the first drink of water that you had after your ordeal as being real good.
When I got aboard the USS Bassett, they gave me a cup of cold water, and I drank that and asked me to want some more. I told him yes, but I think I better wait because I'm afraid it'd make me sick if I drank too much at one time. So
the Bassett gets you back to...
They took us to Philippine Islands, island of Samar, and they had just built a big addition to a hospital there, anticipating
the invasion of Japan.
The invasion. And they opened their wings up with a new addition and just took us in there. They had took us from the ship on a barge over to the land and had ambulances backed up there. Each ambulance could hold four men, 2 on each side, one above the other, and took us into this base hospital, and they put guards around us. Without a special pass, no one could get in or out. Of course, we didn't care about getting out. But they would bring our food in trucks, these hot equipment, to keep it hot and everything. And every day they would bring in I called it a coffee pot, one of the big coffee pots full of chocolate. And boy, that thing was emptied just fast as it could pour out of there. And stuff like that we would eat, drink. But we couldn't eat much at the time. We just have to eat a little bit at a time. And they were better to feed us a little bit about 6 times a day than it was more 3 times. And of course, we didn't know. We still thought we was the only ones. We knew by then, though, that there was others, but we didn't know where they was at. Other ships had picked them up, and they had taken them to some different islands, hospital ship, wherever they had space for them.
There was about 75 men out of the original group of 150 that...
Yeah, somewhere like that.
Okay.
And we stayed there in the Philippine Islands I don't know, 3 or 4 days, maybe 5. And they put us on trucks and took us to the airport, aboard planes, and flew us to Guam. We got over a certain area. They told us you can look out the window and see the spot where your ship went down.
Well, that was brilliant.
But I wouldn't get up out.
I don't blame you.
I wouldn't look out. I knew if I looked, all I could see was water. I didn't care about seeing that. And
Did you get to contact your wife or write her a letter or anything in this time?
Not yet. I hadn't.
Okay.
And we got on that plane. We had our sleeves rolled up because it was hot. A little while we got up in the air, the sleeves come down. When we got to Okinawa, started circling around the land, we rolled our sleeves back up again. It was hot there. And we got off the plane and they took us to the hospital. This hospital, I forget the number of it, but it was right next to the CB base. And they had theaters, outdoor theaters there at CB base, 3 or 4 of them. And us guys like me was able to get up and get out and walk around. We would walk over there to watch the movie. They seemed to me like it was logs, and they'd split the logs, turned them up, no back on them. We'd sit down on that. We'd usually get out there about an hour before we could see the movie because they had to wait till dark. And they'd play this music over and over, and there's 2 songs they played every night, and I'll never forget them. One of them is Working for the Yankee Dollar, and the other one is Drinking Rum and Coca-Cola. I have heard them in local radio stations, but not lately. And we stayed there for a while until they finally loaded us on buses and took us around the island to the other side. Is a submarine rest camp, they called it. It's built special for submarine men that was on duty in submarine. And they took us in there, and it was fenced in where nobody could get in or out without a special pass. And you had to have this pass to eat 3 meals a day. But you eat breakfast, they'd ask you what you want, how you want your eggs and your steak and whatever. Oh, they fed. And 3 meals a day, they would set homemade ice cream, gallon cans. They set 2 gallons on each table, dipper to dip, where you could dip whatever you wanted, and they would set 2 pies on the table. Different peach, apple, whatever, different one. And they would cut those pies in fourths. If you could eat 4/4 of one, that's up to you. Oh, I'm telling you, they fed us there. And we stayed there until they loaded us up and took us down to the piers, went aboard the aircraft carrier, the USS Orlando, and headed back to the States. Well, of course, I'd lost all my clothes, and they'd gave me some clothes, but when we landed in the States, we had to have a dress blues on. I didn't have any. So we stopped in Pearl Harbor, and they brought a ship store alongside, and we went through that, and each one of us got our dress blues and a pair of dress shoes and things. So when we landed in San Diego, we had them on. We got off the ship there. Red Cross and all them different organizations had tables set up there with donuts and all kind of little knickknacks to eat, drink, coffee and milk, and different things that way. And then we loaded into city buses, and they had the banners on the side, welcome home USS Indianapolis survivors. And we paraded down the main street, and the whole city closed up just for us. And people was walking right against the bus, and we had our head and shoulders, everything we could get out the windows, holding the girls' hands as we was walking along. And then when the parade was over, they took us out to a little camp was out there about 15, 20 miles or so. And they told us they didn't have any place for us to sleep except on springs on a bunk. No quilts, no blankets, pillows, or anything. And the little barracks from about 3 feet or something like that on up was screen wire, and it'd get pretty cold at night again. So they asked us, and we told them we wanted to go into San Diego. And if you didn't have a hotel room by noon that day, you didn't get one that night. There's so many servicemen there. Even before, sometimes it was hard to get one for that night. So my buddy and I just messed around there till in town. That night we called home. I didn't even think about it being difference in time. My mother and dad lived in Chicago. So I called my mother. They got her upstairs to the phone. She asked me what I wanted to eat as soon as I got home. I told her fried chicken. So she had it. But anyway, we went to a theater. You could sleep in that theater until 6 a.m. They'd wake you up. Well, the movie it was on that night, we watched it. And it was about Eddie Rickenbacker and his airplane crashing at sea, and them spending 20-something days in the life raft. And we watched that very first night back in the States. And we got back to that little camp then at noon that next day, and they said, all right, everybody is gone. Just about everybody's gone home. Come on in. We had to go into a little room. They talked to us a little bit, told us, they gave us a 30-day survivor's leave. And we had to tell them, the station that we wanted to report back to. They gave us a choice of any station in the United States to report back in after our survivor's leave. And my folks was in Chicago, so I picked the Naval Pier downtown. And I stayed there at the Naval Pier through November. 1st of November, I liked a point and a half, having enough points to get out. So I had to stay till December the 1st, and then I had about a point or two over. And I went to Great Lakes. And when I got out at Great Lakes, December the 3rd, I had my discharge. And of course, my wife was there with my mother and dad. And I told them all they could call me Mr. now. I'm not in the Navy anymore. But I was ready to get out.
Well, Mr. Bell, we're going to take a short break here, and we're going to come back with more right after this. Don't miss it. Welcome back to Local Heroes. We're talking to Mr. Maurice Bell, survivor of the sinking of the USS Indianapolis. I have to tell you, I'm extremely honored and privileged to be in the same room with this hero. Mr. Bell, welcome back. Now, we've gotten you out of the Navy. You were not seaman anymore. You were Mr. Bell. And one of the things that has really gotten to me in studying up on this and over the years is the court-martial of Captain McVeigh for not zigzagging. How do you feel about that?
They charged him with failure to zigzag and, failure to give orders to abandon ship and hazarding the ship and the men on it. Before they court-martialed him in Washington, the Secretary of the Navy, Forrestal, and Admiral King was the top admiral in the Navy at that time. They're the two men that court-martialed him. Admiral Spruance done his best, and several other admirals, to stop them from doing it, but they had their mind made up because the fault was falling back on those two men. They was getting the blame, and they didn't want the blame, so they knew they had admirals and others that they could place it on. So they placed the blame on Captain McVeigh, went ahead and court-martialed him in Washington, and they had everything set before they ever court-martialed him, how it was going to turn out. All the blame was going on Captain McVeigh and clear them. Well, I did not have to go. Several of my buddies did. Now, I did not have the duty that night. That's the reason I did not go. If I'd have been on watch that night when the torpedoes hit, I would have had to go. And they called in Captain Hashimoto, the captain of the submarine that torpedoed and sunk the ship. They flew him in from his hometown because he was already discharged from the Navy over there in Japan. They brought him into Washington and had him to testify, and they assigned him a man to interpret, a Navy man. And he said, later on, he told us that they did not know how much English that he could really understand. So he discovered right off the bat that this was all pre-planned. It's already set up. And the man that was interpreting for him did not interpret everything he said right. He turned it the way they wanted to hear it. So when he wouldn't testify the way they wanted him to, they pulled him out in a hurry and sent him back. Now, I've got a letter at home somewhere, if I could find it, that he wrote to us. And it's a real nice letter. And we had our reunions, first one that started 15 years later. Well, we invited him as our special guest. He wrote us a nice letter and thanked us and said his duties over there, he couldn't get away. Because at the little island that he lived on, I can't remember the name of it, his father was a local Shinto priest. So he took over his father's duties, and he was Shinto priest until he died, early 90s. He was 90-something years old when he died. A few years ago, we was in Indianapolis at one of our survivors' reunion, and was you there? David, my son, was with us, and this young Japanese girl came in. two little boys about so tall, and her husband. And she turned out to be the granddaughter of Captain Hashimoto. She's just as nice and sweet as she could be. I've got pictures made with her, my arm around her shoulder. 2 years later, at our next reunion, she was back. This time her mother was with us, the daughter of Captain Hashimoto. Of course, the captain was already passed away by then. And I got pictures made with her, too. And so I was speaking at a group one time. Some woman held her hand up and wanted to ask a question. So I let her at it. She wanted to know how I felt against the Japanese people as a whole. I told her, I said, well, as Japanese people, I have no hard feelings whatsoever against them. It was the leaders. I said, in fact, I drive a Toyota pickup right now. Of course, I've sold it now. But we have our survivors reunion. They finally changed it now to once a year. I didn't go this year, August. I hope I can make it next year, but I sort of doubt whether I'll ever make another one or not. We got to where we would fly up to Indiana. My wife is from up there, about 30 miles south of Indianapolis. We'd visit her folks, and ones that's still living, her only sister. But now we fly up there in the last few years instead of driving. It's just too much to drive. Oh, like I say, I doubt very much whether I'll go to another one. But maybe.
Well, let's hope. Let's hope. So, you don't believe the Navy was correct in court-martialing Captain McVeigh?
No. They found him guilty on those two charges. And he stayed in the Navy for a few years and then was promoted to Rear Admiral and discharged. He lived in New Orleans for a while. I went over and visited him one time. He came to our first reunion. Of course, back then we started out having them every 5 years. And the second reunion, his doctors wouldn't let him come. And when we had the third one, then he was dead. His wife had died, and he would get hate mail from people all over, still blaming him, even though, you know, saying that if it hadn't been for USOB, my husband or my son or somebody in the family would still be living. And he wouldn't open a letter or a card or anything. His wife had to do all that. When she finally died, well, later on he remarried. He married this woman that he had known years back, and she was in high society, top society. And they moved up, I think it's Connecticut or somewhere up there. And he finally just couldn't take it anymore, and he went in and put his uniform on, got his gun, and went out to the back porch and laid down with his head on the step, put up, pulled the trigger. And his wife let it out that he had been hunting, and he was in the bedroom cleaning his gun and didn't know it was loaded, and it went off. She didn't want her, she's such high society, she didn't want it known that her husband had committed suicide. And that was in 68, I think.
Yes.
And I flew to Washington in '99, and I met a bunch of, I think there was 12, 14 of us, survivors, and some of them brought their wives. There went the second one. And we was meeting with senators and congressmen and all up there. I stayed up there 4 days, or 5 days, meeting with different ones every day, except for Saturday and Sunday. I flew back on Sunday. And we got a joint resolution introduced in Congress to clear his name, his record, and ask for a presidential unit citation for the ship and the crew. Well, they said no, they wouldn't clear his name. But they said they wouldn't give us a presidential unit citation, they'd give us a Navy commendation instead, which they finally did. But anyway, we turned them down on that. Told them no. Well, about that time, they got a new Secretary of the Navy, England, and he was on our side to begin with, so he exonerated McVeigh, and he came to our next reunion, and he gave us the commendation and a medallion, real beautiful medallion of him. So we was glad to get that done, but Captain McVeigh had already committed suicide before that happened. One of his sons was with us up there all that time. He died shortly after, well, before we got him the commendation. Anyway, before we got him cleared. But we had proof. They said we didn't get any messages off the ship, but we had proof that we did. But it took us 40 years to prove it. They wouldn't accept it.
Well, Mr. Bell, myself, and generations of Americans owe you and the entire crew of the USS Indianapolis basically our ability to be here. And I have no words that can say thank you enough. And I really have inadequate words to thank you for being here. I do want to thank you for being on the show, and I want to shake your hand,
Okay.
the hand of a true hero. And thank you for being here. And thank you for watching this edition of Local Heroes. Don't miss the next one.